Most of us have been taught that anxiety, depression, and emotional discomfort are problems to fix. But what if they're actually a part of the growth process? And what if the way we're approaching mental health is missing the point entirely? Today, I am joined by Chris Wells. Chris, thank you so much for joining me on Behind the Practice.
Behind the practice.
Before I hit record here, we were talking about the expansion of people being willing to take on mental health and talk about their problems. Let's talk about what distress really means for so many people today.
From the beginning of my career back in the early 80s, I've rejected the the power and the stigma and the identification with diagnoses. There's really two sources of mental health distress, primarily biogenic and psychogenic. And mostly what shows up at a psychotherapist's office is going to be psychogenic, that is of psychological origins, of developmental origins, and not biogenic, which would be neurochemical, biochemical imbalance or physical problem that's generating mental health distress. The psychogenic is stuff that's the currency of my work as a psychotherapist. So I like the origins of the word psychotherapy. It goes back to the 15th century, and alchemist work already had the word. Psycho comes from psyche, the Greek word for soul, and therapy is to heal. So a great Jungian analyst and writer, James Hillman, talked about psychotherapy, the word being soul healing, soul making. And I've bought into that for most of my career. And I marry that with sort of my spiritual orientation and what I have learned from a very deep education in developmental psychology, that we're not born broken, we're actually born whole. The work of psychotherapy, of soul healing, is to recover that, to restore the original health of an individual. And we have tools to know that needs to be done. And they are often called depression or anxiety or the other common diagnoses that show up in my office. Even the effects of PTSD, the limbic system adjustment to PTSD and survival are also natural means that we're born with to be able to defend against trauma and to heal and to buy time to recover. And its tools can be depression, anxiety, and OCD behavior, and then all the definitions of those symptoms or those diagnoses like withdrawal or avoidance or shutting down, sort of existential paralysis. Those in my world, my clinical world, are more existential kinds of expressions than they are clinical or the stuff of pathology, or pathology, is the word for sickness. Their attempts to be well, to balance the system and maintain the system until the healing could take place. And then the work begins. Finding the map towards healing is the fun part, the exciting part that makes my day.
Yeah, well, what do you think the current model gets wrong about things like anxiety and depression?
Well, we want to get rid of the symptoms right away. We just want to feel better. Many current models, I can't generalize this current model because there's so many, but general current models will be to mitigate, minimize, shut down the symptoms. Even a great model, or one of my favorite models of cognitive behavioral therapy, would be to focus on mindfulness and amplify the self-talk to correct the self-talk. For me, rather than looking at unwanted self-talk and wanting to figure out how to shut that down or change it into something more comfortable, I tend to approach that with clients as saying, let's be amused and curious about that. And that self that is generating the self-talk, to get comfortable with being able to say, that's amusing and interesting. Please say more.
Yeah.
Tell me more. I want to know more. I look at models too that focus on literal hardwiring, that is connection between the prefrontal cortex, or the language part of ourselves that have metacognition, and the limbic system, the biological survival protective system, and the hardwiring that conducts information between the two. And I see it as literal hardwire. So So wires like plumbing conduct stuff. I want to know what's being conducted in the hard wiring.
Yeah.
So rather than choke it off or shut it off or redirect it, I want to split it open and see what's flowing in there and explore it. So
Yeah.
I'll often share with clients that what I've said to you so far about my approach, and I don't really have a model name for this other than maybe depth therapy, which would be sort of what a Jungian would call their work without being an analyst.
Mm.
And um, and I'll often warn a client that we're interested in their symptoms. And if they need something to just stop them or send them away or shut them up, they're in the wrong office. And I will warn that it's probably going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
We want to open up and suppress. I'm sorry, medical models suppress. This model, especially when psychedelic assisted, is if one model is to suppress, this is to learn to express. So we want psyche to express, and that's the goal of my work. And I will use tools from any model that I can dig up uh, to that end in the service of greater expression and relief. So what is in the darkness grows and threatens. And so, by opening up, we create light, we bring in understanding. And by pathologizing, the definition of that is as simple as you don't have to be afraid of yourself. You can stop being afraid. It's okay. You're trying to heal, and you need to know what it is that needs healing.
You work with people who are really seeking growth. They're looking to heal. What are they typically experiencing when they come to your office?
Somehow, maybe it's the way I've presented myself in my website or my profile would be to say explicitly, I hold the belief that you were born whole and well, and that you seek to do that again. I state that I don't use a medical model, and which is pathologically focused, like something's sick and needs to be cured, but that we're looking to find what one's psyche or soul is seeking to say. So I tend to get people who are starting with that idea and they're intrigued and they show up um, interested in growth versus I'm choking on anxiety. I'm, I'm paralyzed by depression. Um, I don't mind that. I welcome those clients and those that are curious or interested in how I present myself. If they bother to look at my profile, will see that if they need medication, if they need that kind of relief, they're calling the wrong person.
Like you just said, people that are just looking for some medication, they're in the wrong office. So let's talk about some of the ways that you incorporate natural products into what you
Actually,
do.
plant medicine is there are places. It's now psychedelic assisted therapy is now legal in Colorado. And there are centers, including here in my hometown, Lakewood, where people can do that with practices and clinicians licensed to provide that. And there are retreats all around the world where people can go and have a weekend and have a great one-off psychedelic experience. That's only part of my practice with clients that understand that their life has been a journey. So I don't do psychedelic journeys. Um, uh, uh, I will help with what we'll call spiritual ceremony that is part of the journey before the ceremony and after the ceremony. So great preparation, half a year of doing depth psychotherapy before even considering a natural medicine kind of ceremony is not uncommon. And I don't do one-off psychedelic journeys.
Who is this type of work actually for and who is it not for?
Well, it's for people who are relatively ego stable, ego intact, who are not afraid of their own selves. They feel that they're at thresholds of a much higher and deeper understanding of themselves. So I think, ready for, I hadn't thought of this before, Katie, but post ceremony integration therapy is really different with my clients who have had that versus those who have not because of the dimensionality that that comes into the therapy. It's a particular dimensional axis of a vertical axis that people can be with a higher self and be comfortable there while exploring deep injury and wound. So they've had an experience of themselves as being well, and an experience of wholeness and safety and belonging. I believe that they always deserved that, and they've been on a journey of restoring that their whole life, versus I was fine and then I started having anxiety and now I'm not fine. And
Mm.
I don't know why. This is something that came into my life and I got to get rid of it. But people who can see that their life has brought them to where they are on purpose, that their whole life has been purposeful, starting to get that idea is the people who get that are who this is for. And then they see what the integration work is on the other side, that, oh, yeah, I don't need to be afraid. There
Yeah.
are all kinds of expressions of psyche. The root words that are conjugated in the word psychedelic are psyche, soul, and delic, which is manifesting or revealing. So if that has a place in someone's therapy journey, then that's the right person for that kind of experience. If that's not coming and someone just wants well, I heard this is really cool. Like I
Yeah.
love, like it's so colorful, and I heard the visuals are awesome. They're as in the wrong place as the person who comes to me looking for a referral for Seroquel.
The name of your practice is Holy You. What does it mean to be wholly yourself?
Whole. So it's a play on my spiritual orientation, holy, but it's about, and that informs my statement that and true belief in. And Uh, I'm in my latter 60s. I was licensed like many people in their mid 20s. Nothing in my practice in that period has convinced me otherwise, that we're born whole. We're born well. We weren't born with the fear that we show up with, fear being the other name for anxiety. We weren't born for self-doubt. We weren't made for that. These are things that were imprinted on us along the way, and um, need to be discarded. So when I think of the Western ideas of the Buddhist idea of enlightenment, as Westerners tend to think that enlightenment is a process of acquisition, acquiring greater grace, acquiring more patience, acquiring more love, acquiring more mercy, forgiveness. I tend to believe, based on my developmental model, which is brain based, wrapped around the models of literal hardwiring from birth, that the bigger part of what Jung's equivalent of self-actualization would be individuation. I believe the bigger part of that is what we discard, that which has been imprinted into our hardwiring from the beginning. And I do believe that we can rewire. Um, that rewiring, that discarding, what remains is that self that was well and whole from the beginning and seeks to be restored.
Have you seen people move from feeling broken to actually understanding themselves in a new way?
Yeah, I've seen changes in what showed up identified as bipolar to looking relatively like pretty much close to symptom free, to a point where I've described results to other colleagues who have said, well, clearly you had the wrong diagnosis. The bipolar was a life sentence. And I will reject that powerfully, because I'm talking about clients who showed up after being hospitalized throughout their adolescence and early adulthood, and they've had 5 psychiatrists label them as bipolar. It wasn't me. I just have witnessed people for whom the symptoms are pretty much either under control or gone.
So, for someone who's listening who feels overwhelmed or stuck, what is one way they can start relating to their distress differently?
Well, you ask, what is this saying to me? What's the message? Let's say that it's not sickness. Let's say that it's that psyche, soul. In some circles you can't use the F word, right? In clinical environments, it's the S word. You shouldn't say soul, but every time we say psychology, we're referring to psyche. That none of us are without psyche. None of us are without soul. You don't need to be religious to know that or feel that. Um, and psyche has, for some of us, it has a high level of autonomy that's separate from the more comfortable word that we use in psychology of ego.
Mhm.
We don't have a problem saying ego, but ego has a problem sometimes with what is psyche, because psyche will not be bossed around the way other parts of self will be. So the greater the split, the greater the distress. So finding some ability to relate to oneself as a person with psyche of equal or greater value than their usual best friend ego is a starting place.
Well, and Chris, I'll say this. Your perspective is really powerful. It's
Okay.
just about making sure that the right people hear it.
Yeah,
If someone is listening right now and thinking something feels off in my life, but I can't explain it, what would you say to them?
let's talk about it. That's so much more in my wheelhouse than somebody saying I have anxiety attacks that choke me and I think I'm going to die. They probably need to see somebody in a practice better integrated with medical care to get stabilized at least.
Well, Chris, this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you again for coming onto Behind the Practice today.
Thank you for having me, Katie. It's been a pleasure.
Behind the Practice is produced by Next Step Social and Podcasting and hosted by Katie Brinkley and Sean Quintero. A special thank you to our guest today and everyone who made this episode possible. For more information or to be on the show, visit nextstepsocial.com.